Having a girlfriend who's always away for work or school is difficult. But having parents who are determined to have their way all the time, that's unbearable. Hi, I'm David, and I'm here to tell you the story of the time my parents forced me to date their enemy's hot daughter for a year. But before anything else, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell icon to show your support for me. I love Charlie, my girlfriend, and although there were a point where we hardly see each other, I would never give up on her. I knew she needed to focus on school and work at the same time, and I didn't want to get in the way of her dreams. So, even though it meant that she would move 1,000 kilometers away, and that we'd only get to see each other on video calls for a while, I bit the bullet and just became the supportive boyfriend I wanted to be. My parents, on the other hand, saw it as an opportunity. Let me tell you a bit about them. They're cutthroat business people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. They would even go as far as to use their own child if it furthered their agenda. My mom and dad were shady, mean, and had zero compassion in their bones. How I came from them was as much a mystery for me as it was for them. Being them, they made a few enemies. One of them happened to be one of our neighbors. Since they moved in, my parents and the Gladwells have never gotten along. On the summer afternoon that the neighborhood threw a welcome party for the Gladwells, my mom and Mrs. Gladwell ended up wearing the same dress. That was only the beginning of the awkwardness between our two families. Turned out, Mr. Gladwell was in the same business as my mom and dad, and they planned to put up their own space in town, just a street away from my family's fast food restaurant. That didn't sit well with my dad at all. He demanded that the Gladwells chose a different spot, no matter how ridiculous a request it was, seeing as the building had already been built, and they were set to open only a month later. That was my dad and Mr. Gladwell's first argument. The Gladwells' restaurant did pretty well. They'd overtaken our restaurant's success in mere months. Everyone loved their country-style fried chicken, and the fact that they were shiny and new brought more customers in who wanted to try the new place in town. My dad was furious. A week later, he launched a new item on his menu: country-style fried chicken. Up to that point, Mr. Gladwell didn't really take my dad seriously. He chalked it up to jealousy. But when Dad chose to start a food war with him, Mr. Gladwell did not hold back. He bought up all the billboards in town, and they launched an advertising campaign that directly attacked our restaurant. Plastered on every billboard in town was a new product that the Gladwells restaurant decided to launch in retaliation, and under it with the slogan, "Better than your average Joe's." My parents' restaurant was known for sloppy joes, and they playfully named theirs the Average Joe. So that got Mom and Dad riled up for quite a while. The amusing part is that the Gladwells were winning. Soon, it was the Gladwells' place that became better known for their sloppy joes. I even went there to try it, and I have to admit, it was pretty good. The rivalry and animosity didn't end even after my mom and dad closed up shop. The town had spoken. The Gladwells did fast food better. But my parents were determined to get revenge. In their minds, they were convinced that our neighbors directly put them out of business. It never once dawned on them that their laziness and complacency cost them their livelihood. Instead of competing at the same level as the Gladwells, Mom and Dad only sought to bring them down. Instead of coming up with better ideas and working harder to keep up with the changing times, they sat back and focused on how to sabotage their rivals. So much so that they lost sight of what was happening to their restaurant, and let the whole operation decline as the years rolled by. On the year that Charlie went to pursue her master's degree, my dad approached me with a crazy idea. "Don't think we'll ever let this go, son," he said. "We still want revenge, your mom and I. We deserve revenge." "Revenge for what? They aren't the ones who caused you to go bankrupt," I told my dad. But he was having none of my reasoning. "You are gonna do this," he insisted. "You're gonna do this for me and your mother, or you are out of this family. Say goodbye to your inheritance." I laughed in his face. "What inheritance? You spent it all when you decided to go on an advertising war with the Gladwells, didn't you? And the business tanked phenomenally too." He stuttered for a while, unable to materialize what inheritance he was talking about. Why, you insolent child! When did you learn to talk back like that? When you decided to ask me to date your rival's daughter just so you can get your petty revenge, I replied. At that, my mother let out an anguished scream from the door. She'd been listening to my father and I argue, and she began to hyperventilate. She fell down and lost consciousness in front of us. At the hospital, all she could say is that I should do as Dad asked me. For the family, she said. And although I didn't like them as people, I simply didn't have the heart or the fortitude to say no to a sick woman. So, even though I had a loving, faithful girlfriend who had always been there for me, on the side, I started seeing Celine. She and I could not be more different from our own parents, and that was why we'd always been friends despite our parents' continued animosity towards each other. But I never really saw Celine that way. But I knew she had a crush on me, and as dirty as it sounds, I used that to my advantage. I only needed to ask her once, and she immediately agreed to be my girlfriend. When she asked what happened with Charlie, my girlfriend, I lied and told her that we broke up because we couldn't take the distance anymore. When she asked whether I'd choose Charlie over her when she came back from school, I lied again and told her I wouldn't. That seemed to make Celine happy, and the happier she became with me, the more guilty I felt when I thought about how it would make her feel if she found out the truth. So, I made sure that she wouldn't. I would still have my video calls with Charlie, but we'd have it at night, when I was alone in my room. I told Charlie that I'd taken up a job and that I wasn't allowed on my phone for the whole day. And she bought it. Whenever Charlie wanted to meet up, I suggested I meet her halfway instead. Hundreds of kilometers away from our little town. To Celine, I would say that I was going on family business. It worked. For a while. And my dad gleaned lots of satisfaction from seeing the look on Mr. and Mrs. Gladwell's faces whenever they saw me with their daughter. They tried to have Celine break up with me, but she wouldn't, threatening to run away if they made her do it. Things were getting quite hectic and serious, and the only thing I really worried about was the fact that Celine was truly falling in love, and the last thing I wanted to do was break her heart. I wanted to tell her. I really did, and I was going to on Christmas when my parents invited the Gladwells for dinner. They told the Gladwells they wanted to patch things up, seeing as it was the holidays, and that I was dating their only daughter. In truth, my mom and dad only wanted to lord the fact over the Gladwells. They just wanted to see Mr. Gladwell's eyes twitch at the suggestion that if Celine and I would get married, I would stand to also inherit and even run their business. I had no intention to. I was going to put an end to all of that. But little did I know that it was going to be done for me. As my dad was about to give his toast, the doorbell rang. And when it didn't stop ringing, my mom reluctantly stood up to get the door. As soon as she opened it, the chilling cold from the street blew in together with the bone-chilling sensation I felt when I saw Charlie's furious face. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" she screamed at me. Charlie? Charlie, no, we have to talk," I sputtered. "We have to talk? Yeah, I certainly do, and you are going to listen." Charlie pulled my mom's seat back and sat on it. My mom could only squeak her objections. Even she was afraid of Charlie. Everybody knew her dad held a high rank in the Russian mafia. "What's this? I hear that you and this home-wrecking snake are now together," asked Charlie, staring daggers in Celine's direction. Mr. Gladwell stood up and pounded his fist on our dining table. "That's enough! Young lady, you don't get to talk to my daughter that way!" Charlie slowly turned her eyes on Mr. Gladwell. That look alone was enough to make him have second thoughts about speaking ever again. "Shut up, sit down," Charlie commanded him. "I'm not here to talk to you." Mr. Gladwell obeyed. "And you too! Sit!" She yelled at my mom, who looked like she was about to say something. It's not her fault. Charlie, please, let's go upstairs and talk," I suggested. But Charlie only turned her rage on me. "Oh, you're absolutely right. It isn't her fault. You couldn't be enough of a man to admit that you couldn't take being in a long-distance relationship. So you start seeing the town floozy on the side? How dare you? I work my butt off. You promised you'd wait for me, and now you got a side chick? Seriously?" "Dad put me up to it," I finally broke. I told them everything. The words fell out of my mouth, and they kept cascading like an endless waterfall of harsh truths. Mr. Gladwell was furious. Mrs. Gladwell slapped my mother across the cheeks. And Celine? Well, Celine was brokenhearted. She didn't let anyone see her cry, though. She just excused herself and ran home. When it was all over, I didn't know what to feel first. Embarrassment, shame, or anger. I chose the easiest route. I fixed an angry glare at my parents and said, "I hope that was worth it for you guys." I moved out with what little I had saved, and Charlie eventually forgave me. But Celine? I never heard from Celine again. I tried calling her and her parents. I even tried to bring her apology flowers one day. But the people who answered the door weren't the Gladwells. I still think about Celine sometimes. I just hope one day I could apologize for how irresponsible I was and horrible I was to her. As for my parents, I don't talk to them anymore.